Hey guys, Flesh Football Observer here, bringing you another Flesh Talks video, and this video is going to be part of a mini-series that looks into my thoughts and predictions regarding how I think the season will pan out. I am of course talking about the very fastly approaching new Premier League season. The 2020-21 season is very much upon us. It begins on Saturday, and I am going to go through who I think will be relegated, who I think will win the Premier League, and who I think will make the top six, so basically them European football places. The first video is going to be looking at who I believe to be relegated. I will go through my thoughts on who I think deserves to be within the discussion as to who will be relegated, and then I will give my opinions as to why. So without further ado, let's begin. So the first club we're going to look at is Leeds United. They are of course last year's championship winners, and they are part of what I like to call the usual suspects. Them, along with Fulham and West Brom, came up from the championship last season, and I like to think that the usual suspects of who deserves to be within the discussion to be relegated often stem from who got promoted last season. The main question for Leeds this year is, do they have the quality to stay up? Comparisons to last year's promoted teams and either surprise and succeed like Sheffield United did, or flop like what Norwich City did. And you'll find that as we go through this video, I will be making a lot of comparisons to those two teams, as they were polar opposite last season. And it will be interesting to see how it comparisons to this time around as well for the promoted sides in general. You look at their squad as a whole and the players that are going to be key for them this season. You've got England newbie Calvin Phillips, where he has a huge step up on his hands this season with his debut season in the Premier League. He's a guy with some potential, and it will be interesting to see how he copes on a bigger stage. Elsewhere, David Nugent up front will be an interesting watch this season. Once upon a time, he was highly rated but didn't quite make it on the bigger stage. But since being away and going down a tier to the Championship, he's found patches of form, became more experienced. It's just a question of whether he can find some good consistency and some decent goal scoring form. However, the pressure isn't entirely on him this year, as Leeds have made some moves in the transfer window and helped him by bringing in in the goal scoring department by bringing in a £27 million striker in Rodrigo from Valencia. It's a huge price tag for a club like Leeds in 27 million, which I think the fee could rise depending on various add-ons. It's a bit more of a gamble than most, I'd say, especially for a newly promoted club, but if it does pay off, it could be the difference between staying up and relegation. Leeds supporters will be hoping that he can very much hit the ground running from the opening whistle. That opening whistle being on Saturday, when the winners of the Championship, Leeds, take on the winners of last season's Premier League, Liverpool. So they've got a big fight on their hands on Saturday. And of course there's Pablo Hernandez, who's been a star man for Leeds over the past 2 seasons, but with his age of 35, he isn't exactly getting any younger, and it will be interesting to see how he will be used over the forthcoming campaign. But these players will be ones to look out for during the upcoming campaign, that I think is for sure. As for the manager, Marcelo Bielsa, he's certainly a character, no doubt about that, but a welcome addition to the Premier League, I think, nonetheless. A tactical manager, adopts the high-intensity pressing game that we're so much used to seeing nowadays. He will be an interesting manager to watch this year, whether it's on or off the touchlines. And of course, there will be some tasty head-to-head clashes this season for Leeds. You've got to think that not only will it be a team versus team thing, whether you put them against the likes of Manchester United, Liverpool, as I previously mentioned, or likes of Chelsea or whoever, but you've got to think it will be an interesting head-to-head clash between manager and manager, whether it's Bielsa against Jurgen Klopp or against Pep Guardiola or even against Jose Mourinho, which in itself should be a very interesting encounter. He certainly has the knowledge and the tactics to survive, but it boils down to whether he has the quality on the pitch in order to carry out the main objective of Premier League survival this season. No fans could help them more at away games than at home, at least until fans are allowed back in the stadiums, that is, or hopefully fans will be allowed back in the stadiums for them. The fans will be a huge miss depending on how long empty stadiums will be around for, and that will be a loss to Leeds' home form. But I believe that away, especially against the bigger clubs, Leeds will love to be back in the Premier League and fully upset some of the big guns, because that's what Leeds and Leeds fans are known for. They don't like, they like that they're not liked kind of thing, and that will make them even more not liked by upsetting some of the big guns. So that'll be interesting to see how that one goes. They're a club with the history and size that probably deserve to be within the Premier League, but will their return to England's top tier division be a short-lived one? We'll have to wait and see. Next, we look at the return of Fulham to the Premier League following a tough playoff battle that got them here. I want to raise the question of, could this prove to be a very similar story to that of Burnley of a few years ago? A side who came up from the Championship to go straight back down again, but came back up the following season at the first time of asking and became a regular Premier League team after a few years. Could this be that kind of story? And ultimately what I'm asking is, will it be a short return for the London club to the big time, or are they here to stay for the foreseeable future? We're going to begin by talking about the manager. You'll know him, I know him, Scott Parker. Became Fulham manager at the end of Fulham's last season in the Premier League a couple of years ago. Fulham fans won't like me reminding them of that car crash of a season in which they had 3 different managers, including Parker, and ended up getting relegated anyway, because despite everything, Parker couldn't save the horror of a show, the horror show of a season that went before him. However, Fulham did stick by Parker following that season, giving another young English manager a chance to build something at a club, and within his first full season with the club, he guided them to a 4th place finish and ultimately promotion back to the big time after surviving the playoff places. It wasn't entirely flawless by any means. Parker clearly still has a lot to learn in management, but it's good to see another young English manager getting a chance at a club with the amazing opportunity that Fulham presents. And so far, they seem to have learned from their previous Premier League experience. The summer transfer window mistake in the fact that they had gone out and spent a ridiculous and crazy amount of money, that hasn't happened so far this summer. They've actually spent I wouldn't say pretty well, but I'd say that they've been a bit more calmer about it. Instead, they've been a bit more sensible about it. The additions mainly of Mario Lemina and Anthony Knockaert, for example, both with Premier League experience, and will boost both the midfield and wide position options in terms of quality and quantity. So you've got that to work with, and of course, you've still got the star man there, Alexander Mitrovic. The goal scoring responsibility lies heavily on his shoulders, and whilst he's another guy with Premier League experience, he scored 11 goals in 37 appearances the last time Fulham were in the Premier League, whilst last season, of course, he spearheaded Fulham's promotion charge with 26 goals in 40 Championship appearances. So again, hopefully he can be the star man for Fulham this season, and fingers crossed for their supporters that he can hit the ground running back in England's top 5 division. It's going to be another tough ask for him though, and they'll need to be more like Sheffield United in the sense that, of course, he will need to take his chances when they fall to him, but the defence need to play their part as well and be strong and resolute, unlike they were 2 years ago. Elsewhere, their side isn't bursting with star quality, but remember, neither was the Sheffield United squad of last season. But they had a team of workhorses, a team dedicated and focused on working as a team. And for them, it worked. Who's to say it won't happen this time around for Fulham? Again, no fans may help Fulham in the bigger games, particularly away from home, but home games won't have the same effect without their loyal supporters. Will they be able to redeem themselves for their last display within England's top 5 division, or will they yo-yo once more? Next, we turn our attention to West Brom, another club that the Premier League welcomes back with open arms for the first time since 2018, and there's a familiar face in the dugout for the Baggies. Slaven Bilic, former West Ham manager of course, was last seen in the Premier League in November 2017, where he was sacked following a poor start to the 17-18 season for the Hammers. Since then, he has had a short stay in some Saudi Arabian club. Yep, thanks Wikipedia for that random bit of knowledge. But returning to England and becoming West Brom manager last year, where in his first season with the Baggies, he led them to being runners-up in the Championship and of course ultimately promotion. If his second spell with a different club in the Premier League begins like his first, West Brom could be a surprise package this year, much like what Sheffield United were last season. With West Ham, he took them to a whole new level, but of course, as we all know, a few years later, his effect and his style fizzled out and his vision became stale and predictable. But when the good times were there, it's certainly something to look back on and give West Brom supporters hope that they can retain their Premier League status this season. As far as the squad goes, there's not much Premier League experience there, but there are some decent players to look out for. One player in particular, midfielder Matheus Pereira. He was a very influential player for the Baggies last season, scoring 8 goals and assisting 20 times in 42 appearances. And whilst he may not get the same amount of space and joy in a higher league, he will certainly be one to watch to see if he can adapt and thrive on a bigger stage. Whilst up front, the likes of Charlie Austin and Hal Robson-Kanu will be leading the line for the Baggies, and goal scoring responsibility instantly falls on them, but they have Premier League experience, which may give them the edge in that area of the pitch. As far as their transfer business goes, the permanent signing of both Pereira, who I've already talked about, and Grady Diangana are now full members of their squad. He was also another influential player of last season who was key to their promotion push, scoring 8 times and assisting 7 last time out. And whilst he showed a lot of promise at West Ham, he will be looking to see this as his breakout season at a new club. Again, the fans aspect will be missed at the Hawthorns, as supporters, as a lot will know of course, their previous season in the Premier League, and they've already really been a yo-yo team in the past. But under new management, a different approach to life in the Premier League, they could be an interesting watch this season. But will they be able to retain their Premier League status? Only time will tell. The next team we're going to be looking on is Crystal Palace. Palace enter this season on an 8-game winless run already following the back end of last season. The club had many issues last season. One was the many injuries that they picked up, which resulted in the squad being down to the bare bones. And another was the lack of goals they scored. They scored 31 goals over the entirety of last season, the second lowest total for that last campaign. Goal scoring, I think, has always been a bit of an issue for Palace. The likes of Jordan Ayew and Wilfried Zaha, Palace's main men in attack, kind of struggled with only 13 goals between them last campaign. But if Palace are to survive this season, they will need their form to pick up for this current campaign. Once again, not much activity in the transfer window either so far, with only one real signing in the form of Eberici Eze from QPR. I don't know the ins and outs of their transfer business, but I don't remember them spending much last year either. Last season, Palace flew a little under the radar with other clubs around them overshadowing them, and they were heading for a slightly higher than normal mid-table finish until their form took a bit of a nosedive following lockdown, or shall I say, the end of the season. As for Roy Hodgson, we all know about him. To be honest, I think it will be the first manager to get sacked this year. As horrible and as bad as that may sound, I think he's done very well with Palace since he took charge, but every year the competition gets greater, and with the lack of investment and seemingly lack of forward direction the club seems to be going in, it could prove to be a difficult year for the former Fulham and Liverpool manager. And of course, the one thing that Palace had enjoyed a lot was their hostile and noisy atmosphere at Selhurst Park, which due to the current situation of course, they no longer have. It could have coincided with their end of season form because of how in the past they picked up some decent results, particularly at home, but for the time being they don't have that in their arsenal right now, and so it will be interesting to see how they adapt to that and how they move forward without the crowd, at least for the foreseeable future. I believe it could be a very difficult season ahead for the Eagles, and it could be the end of their current stay in the Premier League if they're not careful. Next we move on to Newcastle United. They were probably on many people's prediction list to go down last season. However, Steve Bruce surprised a few people by actually doing better than what many people had expected. I mean, in saying that, there was also the possibility that maybe that the ones that went down last season were worse than everybody imagined. Either way, Newcastle survived another season in England's top flight division. That's the bottom line. Newcastle are probably back on many people's prediction list to go down this season as well, but this year again, they may be saved by having 3 teams that are worse than them. Goals were difficult to come by last season. They had the 4th lowest record in the league last campaign, which is why they boosted their attacking options with the addition of Callum Wilson. Former Bournemouth striker signed for 20 million, and it will be interesting to see if he can rediscover his goal scoring form that he displayed with the Cherries over the past 5 years for Bournemouth in the Premier League. They're also rumoured to be close to signing left back Jamal Lewis. They've also signed Ryan Fraser, the winger who struck up quite the partnership with Callum Wilson over the years at Bournemouth as well. So they will be welcome additions to areas that need strengthening, and both are great going forward, so it will be an aid to an overall area of the squad and their style of play, as it will therefore be strengthened in the hope that it brings more goals to the team. Otherwise, the usual key players remain: Jamal Lewis at the heart of the defence, the Longstaff brothers in midfield, and of course Alan Saint-Maximin, the winger with the blistering pace. He will certainly be one to watch this season following his promising debut season last year. It's been a long few months for Newcastle and their supporters amongst the rumours and reports of a potential takeover, and even longer many years under the current owner Mike Ashley. The club's future is still very much up in the air. Steve Bruce could have been out of a job if the takeover did in fact happen, but with anything possible at St James's Park, he still could be gone by Christmas if things don't begin well for the Magpies this season. There'll be certainly a team to keep your eye on over the forthcoming campaign, maybe for the wrong reasons, but a club with the fan base, the size and the history that they possess, they need to be in the Premier League. Just a fact. Will they survive another year, or will they finally be caught out this season and doomed for relegation? Only time will tell. Other teams to consider as possible relegation candidates include Aston Villa. They survived literally by the skin of their teeth and a very dodgy goal line technology error, of course, last season. They struggled to score, they struggled to keep clean sheets and defend, but they certainly got some very talented players within their ranks, including their golden boy, their talisman, Jack Grealish, who, if they manage to keep beyond the transfer window ending, he will need to put in another big season for the club to have any chance of survival. Another team to consider, I think, are West Ham. They're another side that barely survived last season, with the ascension and fantastic form of Mikel Antonio certainly helping them right at the end of the season when they needed it most. He will certainly be needed again this year if West Ham are to survive again. Him, along with the likes of Andrei Yarmolenko, Declan Rice, Sebastian Haller and Felipe Anderson, are all ones to watch this season for the Hammers. But with David Moyes as manager, a manager who seems a bit of a throwback, who seems to be stuck in the past type of manager, you don't really know what to expect from the club this season, or him or his players. I probably expect them to stay up this year, as I think there are probably at least 3 worse teams, or 3 teams that are in a worse position than them anyway, but they are probably worthy of this discussion regardless. Another team to consider are possibly Brighton, although I think with their current squad and manager they won't be pulling up any trees this season, so to speak. I think they will be safe nonetheless, but at the same time I do think that if things don't quite go well, they deserve to be within the discussion nonetheless. Another team to possibly consider might be Sheffield United. This again is a bit of an outsider sort of discussion to have, because despite having an exceptional season last campaign in which they surprised pretty much everybody with their 9th place finish, it's another season, it's their 2nd season. Could second season syndrome kick in for them? Will they suffer like what Huddersfield did a couple of years ago, which was with everybody working them out and ultimately punishing them for it? Only time will tell on this one. Okay, so now that I have analysed possible candidates for relegation, it's time for my own predictions, and honestly I think it will be a close run thing this year, closer than probably any season that's gone before. But in my opinion, I think that West Brom, Fulham and Crystal Palace will be the ones relegated this season. For Fulham, I like Scott Parker, but I just don't think their squad will be able to cut it at this level, and I think there are other clubs simply better equipped and have more experience than them that will see them get their heads above water rather than Fulham. For West Brom, a lack of experience will ultimately be their downfall. I draw comparisons to Norwich of last season, where their squad will look energetic, they'll look lively, they'll be fighting for everything, but ultimately they'll fail on the basis of being inexperienced and again having teams around them that are of a better level than them. And as for Palace, I just don't see them moving forward. They are rather stagnating and stationary, and I don't see where they're going to get a consistent enough goal scorer from. They've danced with the devil of relegation for a long time, whether they've realised it or not, and this year I fear for them that it might get them this season and this time around. And with that, that brings an end to this video on my personal predictions for who will be relegated this season for the upcoming 2020-2021 Premier League season. But of course, these are just one man's thoughts and one man's opinions. I want to know what you guys think. Who do you think deserves to be within the discussion for possible relegation this season? And who do you think will, in fact, go down this season, back down to the Championship? Let me know your thoughts, your comments and your opinions in the comments section below. I'd love to read them. Also, don't forget to look out for my other videos in this mini-series where I'll be discussing the Premier League winners and who gets European places. They will be coming up as the Premier League season draws ever closer to another chapter being written in football history. Otherwise, hit that like button on the way out if you enjoyed the video, subscribe if you're new or want to see more content like this. Both things will be greatly appreciated. And as always, thank you all so much for watching and listening. I've been Fletch, this has been another Fletch Talks video, and I will see and speak with you all again soon in another video.